Hello there, I'm Rhys Hughes and I'm from Bookshop Crew UK, and it's a pleasure this evening to be speaking to two wonderful bookshops. We have Christina here from Treadwell Bookshop and Greg from Gosh Comics, both very, very, very busy bookshops in central London and very prominent as well in the area. And I'm looking forward to speaking to both of you today. Hello to you both.
Hi there.
Hello, nice to be here.
So, Christina, first off, can I just ask you to introduce yourself and just give us tell us a little bit about the bookshop, please?
I'm Christina Oakley Harrington, and I am the founder and still chief bottle washer at Treadwells Books in Bloomsbury. We specialize in the esoteric, so the occult, the mystical, and but actually always placing it within the context of wider European culture. So yeah, we're in our 21st year and still happy and still throwing parties.
I like that. That's a good description. Good description. Bottle washer. I like that. Very good. And Greg, same for yourself. From Gosh Comics, can you tell us a little bit about yourself and a bit about the shop?
Yeah, sure. My name's Greg Basterfield. I work at Gosh. I'm the small press and independent publications manager. I've been there about 3 years, but the shop's existed for 38. I was a big fan before I started working there, so I've been very aware of it for a long time. But yeah, we specialize in comics of all kinds, superheroes, manga, Euro, genre, small press, just like a bit of everything, really.
Thank you very much for that. I have been into both of your shops before, and the reason that we chose both of you, just I did explain this to Christina beforehand, but essentially we have found that your two bookshops tend to be the two spectrums, the two in that we've got a lot of people who adore going into Treadwells and a lot of people who adore going into Gosh. We've put you both together today for that reason, and we love the fact that there's a wide variety of specialisms across London's bookshops, including yourselves. And Greg, if you don't mind, why do you think specialist bookshops are so important?
Um, as somebody that kind of growing up, I was into comics and things that that didn't seem as popular at my school. Having places like comic shops or esoteric bookshops where you could go, where it was a normal thing, and you could find things physically in front of you that maybe you never thought you'd get to see, or you never thought you'd find in a physical bookshop. I think that's really important. It's kind of like a hub or a home away from home for people who have very specific interests. Um, it's also it's a great way to find things, to be introduced to things that you didn't know existed as well. Um, Either by people that work there that really care about the field, or just stumbling across things that you wouldn't have encountered in a normal library or browsing the internet because you don't know the specific thing you need to search for. Um, yeah, so I just for me it's always just welcoming, like horizon broadening experience going into kind of specialist bookshops.
That's a really good description. And I love the fact that you brought in the fact that um, specialists tend to offer better, different perspectives for people. I think that's a lovely way of describing interactions with bookshops. And I know Christina Treadwell's sort of similar sort of feeling. How do you feel about specialist bookshops? How they're important?
Well, as was said, they're a community center. They're a place for people to find like-minded people. They're a space that is neither home nor school. It's a place that is a place apart. And so therefore it's a kind of sanctuary for the imagination that we cultivated at home, whether it's an interest in the mystical or whether it's an interest in comics. There's a place that it's a sense around experience for the first time if you go there for the first time. But the thing that I wanted to add to that is that in a specialist bookshop, the bookseller is this crucial person. They're the person who can take the newcomer and explain it to them, and can also accommodate the long-term aficionado. And it's in that space you can go, and I don't know if you have this at Gosh, we have this at Treadwell, somebody walks in and says, I don't know anything about this, but I'm really intrigued. Help me. And equally, we can have somebody say, oh, do you have the 1963 second impression of the Crowley, this, and this, and this, and, which is variant of that and the other and the other and the other. And we can say, no, we don't. And we have a conversation and we learn something, they learn something. And I'm really excited about that span. It seems a very narrow niche, but within that, you've got everybody who comes in, a newbie for themselves, a specialist, passionate person, and the person who comes in and say, this is my wife's thing, or this is my husband's thing, this is my brother's thing, help me out. And I love that about a specialist bookshop, because we really understand we're there for people, and we learn where they're at and we help them where they're at.
That's perfect description, both of you. I think specialisms are really important, and London is such a hub of bookshops. This year we've got just under 100 bookshops taking part in the London Bookshop Crawl, and having those specialist bookshops to show people is really, really important, being able to take them to places. And as you've described, both of you have described, that it's very much that we have people who've never been to you before who are excessively excited about finding something new. And your description there, Christina, really did cover it quite well there. Do you find that you have more customers coming in who are already interested in your specialism of subject, or do you think there's a mixture of interests and sort of locals and tourists as well?
We have always been there for the long-term interested people, because there's nowhere else for people who have this passion to go. I mean, if somebody's passionate about, their religion, they can go to the temple, they can go to the school, they can go to seminary. If you're interested in this specialism, or maybe even in comics, you can go to conventions and you can go to bookshops. That's it. So we're really there for that community. And then people come in as tourists, people come in as new interested, temporarily interested, passing interest. That's all fine. But the core is the people for whom it's a long-term thing.
I think that's very much the case with the people that we take around on our tours as well. You often find that people sort of are excessively excited about going to one specific bookshop because that is the thing that they themselves are interested in, if that makes sense. We have a lot of people traveling into London, so people who don't live in the area, who've never been to your bookshops before. So it often is a case of sheer, and I know this is definitely the case with Treadwells, with yourselves, in that we've got, it's a beautiful bookshop, is it not? There's a lot going on in your shop.
There is a lot going on in the bookshop. We have a mummy case, and we've got brocade drapes, and we've got silk swathes, and we have two giant antique sofas. And part of the reason we do that is because why not delight the senses? When we're fortunate enough to live in a place where you can pick all that stuff up at a charity shop, and also we're so aware, and maybe you have this at Gosh as well, is that people come a long way. They've at the very least had to pay for a travel card, and they've chosen to do that rather than press one button to buy a book on the internet. So we really want to make it worth the trip.
Totally. And I know, Greg, going into Gosh is also a bit of an experience. I often go into Gosh when I'm in central London. I'm a bit of a graphic novel nerd at heart, if I'm humbly honest. I'm sat next to a bookshelf that is coated with stuff that I've probably purchased from your shop, but equally probably haven't read yet, if I'm humbly honest. In some instances as well. But there's very much, it's a feeling sort of similar, the same as Treadwells, in that yours is a bit of a destination. There's not really anywhere else in London that has your sheer number of titles, I would say.
No, we're very lucky. We've got a good location and a good amount of space. And when so the owner Josh and the co-owner now Andrew have worked in comic shops basically all their lives. And Gosh used to be opposite the British Museum, quite a small space with a very atmospheric spiral staircase into a basement that was the only way in and out. So when they chose the new location, they chose it because it had such huge windows. It could be a very bright and welcoming place. specifically so that we could attract people who haven't read comics before or had a particular idea of what a comic shop would look like or feel like when you were in it. So we've got a good amount of space that we also use to fill with a lot of comics. We try to, I think it's whether you know lots or you don't, I think it can be quite overwhelming going into bookshops that are so full of books because you don't know where to start. So we do our best to make it as welcoming as we possibly can, while also having a basement which is more reminiscent of classic comic shops. That it's a bit darker. It's full of superheroes. But yeah, we just want to kind of keep it as welcoming and open and friendly as we can, really. It's what I kind of, it's the part of the job that I feel the most strongly about, is that I want people to feel welcome and comfortable to spend as much or as little time as they want there, and also be able to talk to us and ask for help and things. But yeah, so I think Gosh has got a bit of the old comic shop, and also feels far more fresher and newer and welcoming, I hope.
I was originally going to direct this question to you, Greg, but actually I think it's very apt for both of you, if I'm humbly honest, in that we love bringing groups in to your bookshops while on the bookshop call. And it feels like sometimes people aren't familiar with graphic novels or aren't familiar with specialisms in Treadwells. And I feel that there's this sort of awesome moment when they step over the door frames, where they suddenly find something that they appreciate, or they find an interest, or they find something new. Outside of the experiences of us bringing these people in when kind of they've got no choice because they're being guided by a guide and this is the next shop we're going to, do you find that customers who, let's say, who traditionally would say they don't like comics, or they are reluctant to come in, Greg?
Yeah, I mean, it's sort of one of my favorite bits, when people come in and say that they've never read a comic before, or they don't know where to go, what to look for. I think there's a lot of people who don't realize that the world of comics is the same as like the world of books, that it's not a genre in itself, but a format. So people come in and expect comics to be a certain way, maybe, and I can show them that there's a comic about absolutely anything they could possibly want. So talking to people who come in and say, I've never read a comic before, I can ask them what they like in other forms. So what kind of films they like, what kind of TV shows they like, what kind of music they like, anything, because there's a comic for everybody. It's being able to show people the kind of huge breadth of topics and formats and forms that comics can take is really exciting. So I love it. I love finding books for people that I really think they're gonna gel with or respond to. I love when they come back and tell me it's worked. Or they come back and say that it didn't work, but they liked the idea, like they still want to keep going and find more things. But we'll go into further specializations later. But I think independent work we really like to spotlight, and that can seem completely impenetrable to people because it looks so weird sometimes. So just finding kind of in ways to introduce people to comics and show them they're not so scary, and that you don't have to be an intimidating gatekeeping person to work in a comic shop either, which is stereotyped by things like The Simpsons. So yeah, I love it. I love people that get to buy their first comic at Gosh.
I was going to say that character in The Simpsons probably has done more harm than any.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm not saying they don't exist, but
no, true.
But comics make me so happy. It's hard to be too surly or yeah, I love it.
Yeah, Christina, do you find the similar sort of thing with people who are sort of I won't say anti-magic or spiritualism, but perhaps are sort of negative against it, and perhaps sort of are a little bit scared of coming over the threshold?
We often have the friend who's reluctantly dragged in, or the spouse or the partner who's you know, waiting uncomfortably by the door. And then they find something about, you know, the occult themes in Bauhaus architecture, and they're an architect, or, you know, a treatment of, you know, esoteric planetary magic in Shakespeare, and they're a Shakespeare person, or, you know, the exploration of, you know, magical themes and Freemasonic themes in Mozart. And you know, so I love the surprise when somebody realizes there's something there for them too. Or another one we have is because we do magic in anthropology. So somebody will say, well, you know, they'll just wander over and they'll see the Asia section, or they'll see, you know, the Japan section, and there'll be something about, you know, esoteric culture in those communities, and often secondhand. We have a lot of secondhand and older books in those areas, and they, oh, you know, they're just amazed that it's not all, you know, say cheap spell kits. And that's a really, really lovely moment. You know, one of the purposes of Treadwells existing is to show the world that, you know, magic and spirituality and mystical things are part of every culture. And that, so we place all of those books in the context of their cultures around the world and around Europe and down the centuries. So we have a lot of history of books as well as how to. And that's not what the reluctant person dragged in expects. And I love that. And there's also the intimidation that you know, you talked about there, Greg, which is of, you know, the idea of the intimidating specialist shop. You know, so you've got The Simpsons, we have black books.
Yes. Yes, Bill Bailey's got a lot to speak for in that instance.
Yeah, it's just the embarrassment of not being an expert in the fate of somebody sat behind a till who knows the subject inside and out. And so many customers expect the sneer because we all watch black books, or because we went into specialist bookshops when we were young, as I did. I used to go into, you know, rare bookshops because I've always loved history, and I would go into these antiquarian bookshops, and there'd be some old half-drunk codger, you know, in a jacket, just giving me a look like, you don't go home now. And
you don't belong here. Unfortunately, I mean, walking around, having been doing bookshop crawling for 9 years, I'm very, very sadly, there are still shops like that, and it is a sort of very interesting feeling when you take groups into those shops, because often the people going into those shops with you, they don't care, and it's quite a nice feeling that you're with a group of supportive other people. You're in this bookshop whether that person likes it or not. So it's sort of a very nice way to approach it. But on your own, absolutely, I can imagine it's that horrible, intimidating moment, and it's and I'm pleased that there are bookshops like yourselves that are so community minded, so friendly, so very much approachable, to get people into to help them break out of their shell, I guess, is the best way of
we have specialist bookshops have a reputation to overcome.
Yeah,
reputation of the sneering expert, the person behind the till who, whether it's comics or whether it's the occult or whether it's, I don't know, cars, it's, you know, the embarrassment with which one goes and says, I don't know much about this, bracing oneself for the reply. And, you know, friendliness is God, what a lovely way to be met. That's totally great. You don't know anything. That's great. You're curious. How wonderful to be curious. We should all go through life being a bit curious.
Absolutely. Specialisms are very important because they contain micro specialisms within them. And I know that both Treadwells and Gosh, you have specific specialisms with your staff members, but I'm going to direct it directly at you first, Christina. Is there a sort of specialism that you feel that you have specifically when you're talking about books and literature?
Well, I write about the history of modern pagan witchcraft. So I write and I publish on that. So that is a specialism, but I'm sure Greg will say the same for his own field. You can't, a lot of these are overlapping. So, you know, one has to know modern esoteric Kabbalah, which leads you back to Renaissance magic, and the use of spells leads you right back into medieval grimoire magic and the texts around that, of which there are reprints as well as first editions. And it doesn't look having a general knowledge is really, really important. It's a grounding. You know, we all did, you know, A levels or, you know, foundation years if we went to our school. Those are super, super important because it means that no matter what you're interested in, you have somewhere to jump off from. You know, you can go further if you have a grounded base. So I would say that grounded base is more important to me as a bookseller than my specialism. My micro specialism I can geek about with the 6 other people in the world who have that micro specialism. But in the bookshop, I'm learning things all the time because we do have that ground knowledge. Somebody says, did you know Helena Blavatsky, you know, was in northern Egypt and did seances there? And I'm like, okay, I know enough to be interested enough to ask the next question. I go home feeling enriched.
It must be sort of a nice feeling when you're working in bookshops, actually being able to have that time to be able to learn so much on the shop floor. There's not many shops like that, I would imagine. Ditto, same to you, Greg, if that's all right. Sort of, do you have micro specialism, a specialism specifically to yourself, or are you more sort of a broad approach when it comes to being a bookkeeper, if you'll mind the way of me putting it?
Yeah, it's funny because in the reading through the questions that we were going to be looking at tonight, I was thinking I sort of forgot that comics was the specialism of Gosh, because I take for granted, because I'm surrounded by comics all day, that this must be what it's like everywhere. And I was thinking the specialism being the sort of smaller press, small publisher work. But comics is absolutely a specialist subject, really. Within that, so when I was looking at what I specialized in, I wrote dry and sad comics, because that's my favorite thing. But really, small press and smaller publishers, independently published books and comics are my favorite thing and what I specialize in. But like Christina said, it's like I have being a fan of that means that I get to watch creators start their work and then end up being picked up by bigger publishers. So then like my knowledge of them leaks over into kind of larger publishers and kind of more general genre books, or just different sections of the shop. I can't help but learn so much about so many different kinds of comics that I didn't really read before, because I'm presented with them all the time. And I love it. I love finding new artists and writers and creators that speak to me. I get to, my phone is being strange. I'm presented with kind of creators coming to the shop constantly as well. So I get to learn all sorts of things about things that are up and coming, or things people are working on at that moment. But my specialization in Gosh is sourcing and curating the small press section. So I have a big awareness of kind of internationally, especially in North America, kind of new creators who are just getting their start making their own comics. I was in Angoulême Comics Festival last week, which was insane and really showed me how, as much as I can know about English language comics, there is such an unbelievable ocean of international works that I haven't ever been presented with, because they don't get translated. But I want to learn more all the time. So I'm always trying to find out more and more about these things existing and being created.
Thank you both for answering that. It's such a nice feeling being in specialist bookshops. And I know that, as I mentioned earlier on, London is filled with them. But if you didn't have to choose your own, Christina, is there another specialist bookshop somewhere in the world, somewhere that you feel is your, I won't say favourites, because I'm not entirely sure we can have favourites when we're talking about, talking on Bookshop Crawl, but your favourite, I'm going to use the word, sorry.
My favourite bookshop that is specialist, but not by genre, but by atmosphere, is one that I've been going to since I was about 10 years old, and that's the Strand in Manhattan. And what's specialist about it for me is you can get lost in it and you can lose a day. And that's its own specialism. The it's not a topic specialist book, and I know that's what bookstore, and you asked for that. But what so specialist for me, and what I carry from having gone to the Strand as a young person, was the sense that you can be surrounded by ideas and you will meet the completely unexpected. And I have ideas about what I'm interested in, what I'm not, and I've had very fixed ideas about that since I was about 3. And the Strand Bookshop always disrupts that.
That's somewhere I've never been. I want to go back to the States, and unfortunately, haven't been since I was very little. But that is, we do dream of doing a bookshop crawl in the United States. That would be incredible. So if anybody is watching this and fancies taking up the task and helping us to fund it, that would be amazing. But Greg, a similar question for you. Have you got a sort of specialist bookshop, not your own, that somewhere in London or elsewhere that you feel is your favourite?
I made a list of places, but it'd be hard for me to narrow it down to. I'll just read out some. So Treadwells was on my list, and then in London there's places like Gaze the Word, Tender Books, March Payne, which is a specialist children's bookshop in Cecil Claw. It's wonderful. The Scoob, Don Lon, which is kind of more art and cultural theory, independent publications and things. There's then comic shop wise. I spend so much time at work talking to people about other comic shops I'd love to visit, because we get people in from all over the world, and I say, "Oh, you're only 100 miles away from Chicago," or whatever. There's a shop called Quimby's in Chicago, which is all small press. I'd love to go. Lambic in Amsterdam. There's a shop called All the Problems in This World that's in Berlin. There's Fat Bottom in Barcelona. Yeah, I could keep going. That's probably enough. There's lots. I love it. I follow so many Instagram accounts and plan trips and travel around which bookshops I'll finally be able to visit. So that's there we go. There's a lot.
One of the nicest things that we actually got to do during COVID, if you can say the nicest things during COVID, but one of the nicest things that happened was me being off work full time, effectively being put on leave effectively during COVID, meant that we could concentrate on Bookshop Crawl, and meant that we could actually do a worldwide bookshop crawl online. So we were able to introduce people. Thankfully, a lot of those bookshops that you both mentioned were included, and we got to take people all around the world, basically introducing to the bookshops that they may not know about. And I feel very much that it's past that point. After that point, that's when we started asking this question about other bookshops that people appreciate, because it's so nice to be able to share that bit of information with people. Because again, just hearing the word, like you said, you're only 100 miles away, but at the same time, you're only 100 miles away. It might well be that that's the impetus that gives someone to go, actually, I will travel that distance to that place. So thank you very much for sharing that. That really is appreciated. The last question that we've got here, and I'm not going to make it my last, because there was one other question that we usually ask that isn't on this list, about a recommendation for a book. And if I'm going to say that I'm going to say that quietly now, and then I will ask this question first, just to give you a bit of time just to think about it. But what is the best thing about working in a specialist bookshop, Christina?
Ask the people. It's people where they meet ideas and enthusiasm. It's not people talking about how long the journey was or how bad the traffic is or property prices. It's people, they're most curious and they're most passionate. They're most almost like breath held.
It's perfect. And I have a funny feeling that Greg's going to say something very similar.
Yeah, it's like, I can't really put it any better. The people is the best bit. Like coming home and talking about, kind of like a child, I got to enthusiastically talk to about Godzilla comics, or it's the people. It's very, very much
wasn't
the people.
Mine, was it, Greg?
It may well have been. Yeah, they're my favorite customers. Children who love Godzilla is my favorite part of my job, probably.
Perfect. And then I'm going to ask that lovely mean question then, Christina, but I may sort of direct it to you first. If you were able to sort of recommend a book to someone in general, Is there one that you go to sort of as a that annoying customer who comes in and doesn't have a clue? Let's be brutally honest. Is there one that you think, okay, I'm gonna? You've probably got a few in your mind, but effectively, is there sort of some that you may feel that you would direct them to?
If they are a culturally curious and introspective person, generally, I direct them to a book by Vivian Crowley called. Now I'm blurring it over. I'm so sorry. Francesco Dimitri's book That Sense of Wonder, and Vivian Crowley's book Wild Ones, both of which are about the magical outlook and about how it overlaps with creativity, wonder, nature, culture. And it doesn't give an outside look in. These are insiders looking out and self-reflecting in a very readable way. If somebody's a bit more historically interested, I will always recommend The Book of English Magic by Richard Haygate and Philip Carr-Gomm, which has been in print nonstop since it came out in, I think, 2008.
Perfect. One of those sounds like it would very much interest Becca. So she's probably going to be watching this later when she's doing the subtitles and thinking, "Ooh, that's going on my list." Greg, same question, if I may.
Yeah, so the easiest book I find to recommend is maybe a bit of a cop out, but it's Watchmen by Alan Moore. It got me interested in comics in a big way when I was 15 or so, and I think that you can read it a number of times and glean new things from it every time. And it's kind of so well known for a reason. But my favorite book that I really try to show people and tell them that I think it sort of is doing everything right that a graphic novel could do is a book called Ultrasound by a creator called Connor Steckschulte. I read the first part of it after not reading comics for a number of years, and now I work at Gosh. So it really affected me, and I think about it every day. It's just wonderful. Yeah. So Ultrasound by Connor Steckschulte is my number one pick. But Watchmen is a really good gateway drug.
Thank you both, Greg, Christina, for taking a little bit of time with us today. I'm so appreciative of your time, and I'm really appreciative that we've been able to talk about specialist bookshops in general. I am hoping that over the Bookshop Crawl weekend, you get a lot of people coming in, and you get to experience those moments, that Godzilla moment, that moment where you get to talk about something that you with someone completely ready to engage. Let's put it that way. And I feel that that's why we are here as Bookshop Call team, to try and introduce people to you, people like yourselves, hence doing this talk today. And I am very appreciative. So thank you very much for your time, both of you.
Thanks for having me.
Thank you for having us. This has been great.